Chapter 1: The Fall Before Christmas. Brooke Sullivan stared at the email on her screen, the words blurring as if her monitor had decided to cry for her. Termination effective immediately. The phrase sat there like a cruel joke, bolded and final. She scrolled down, hoping for some hidden clause, some lifeline, but all she found was legal jargon and a reminder about her severance package. Her throat tightened. She'd fought tooth and nail for this job, clawed her way through late nights and endless depositions, sacrificed birthdays and weekends for the promise of partnership. And now, gone. Not because she'd screwed up, but because someone else had missed evidence sitting in plain sight. Public record. A rookie mistake that wasn't hers to own. Yet here she was, the sacrificial lamb. Brooke closed her laptop with a snap and pressed her palms to her eyes. The silence of her apartment felt heavier than usual, broken only by the hum of the heater and the distant wail of a siren outside. She'd imagined this space as her sanctuary once, a sleek one-bedroom with exposed brick and a view of the city skyline. Now it felt like a cage. Her phone buzzed. Mom, of course. Brooke let it ring twice before answering. Sweetheart, how are you? Her mother's voice was warm, but Brooke could hear the undercurrent of expectation. The same tone she used when asking if Brooke had met anyone nice lately. I'm fine, Brooke lied, her voice hoarse. You sound tired. Are you eating? Christmas is just around the corner. You should come home for a while. Take a break. Brooke hesitated. Home. The word conjured images of twinkling lights, her dad's booming laugh, and her mother's relentless commentary on her love life. Normally, she'd beg off. Too much work. Too many deadlines. But now, she had nothing but time. Yeah, Brooke said slowly. Maybe I will. Her mother squealed like Brooke had just agreed to marry a prince. Wonderful. Your room is exactly how you left it. Well, except for the treadmill. And the sewing machine. But we'll make space. Brooke managed a laugh, the first in days. Thanks, Mom. When the call ended, she sat in the quiet again, staring at the half-packed boxes from her last move. She'd thought she was climbing the ladder. Turns out, she was just dangling from it. 2 days later, Brooke was on the highway, her car stuffed with suitcases and the remnants of her city life. The December sky stretched gray and endless, and Christmas music crackled faintly from the radio. She tried not to think about the office, the case, the humiliation. Instead, she focused on the road signs counting down to her hometown, a place she hadn't lived in since college. By the time she pulled into her parents' driveway, dusk had settled like a soft blanket over the neighborhood. Strings of lights twinkled from every porch, and the scent of pine drifted from the wreath on the door. Her mother burst out before Brooke could grab her bags, arms wide, wearing a sweater that looked like Santa had exploded on it. Brooke, you're here. Her father followed, grinning, his cheeks ruddy from the cold. Look at you, city girl back in town. Brooke smiled, letting herself be hugged, kissed, fussed over. For a moment, the weight on her chest eased. Inside, the house was a riot of holiday cheer. Garlands draped over the banister, stockings hung with care, and a tree so big it looked like it had ambitions of touching the ceiling. Brooke's old bedroom was indeed intact, save for the treadmill in the corner and a stack of quilting magazines on the desk. That night, lying in her childhood bed, Brooke stared at the glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to the ceiling. She felt like a teenager again, except teenagers had hope. Brooke had uncertainty, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to figure out who she was without the job that had defined her. Tomorrow, she promised herself she'd go out, see the town, maybe grab a coffee, anything to remind herself that life existed beyond courtrooms and contracts. She didn't know it yet, but tomorrow would bring more than coffee. It would bring a chocolate milkshake, a worn paperback, and a pair of eyes she hadn't seen in 15 years. Chapter 2: Home for the Holidays. The next morning, Brooke woke to the sound of laughter drifting up from the kitchen. For a moment, she lay still, staring at the familiar ceiling with its faint water stain shaped like a lopsided heart. The scent of cinnamon and coffee curled through the air, tugging her out of bed like an invisible hand. She padded down the hall in fuzzy socks, her hair a mess, wearing an old college sweatshirt she'd dug out of a drawer. The kitchen was a scene straight out of a holiday card. Her mother in a red apron dusted with flour, her father flipping pancakes like a short-order cook. Morning, sleepyhead, her mom chirped, sliding a plate toward her. You look thin. Eat. Brooke smiled faintly and obeyed, sinking into a chair. The pancakes were golden, the coffee strong, and for a few blissful minutes, she let herself enjoy the simple comfort of home. Her father glanced up from the stove. So, what's the plan today? You gonna see anyone? Catch up with your old crew? Brooke shrugged, stabbing a piece of pancake. I don't know. Maybe grab a coffee. Walk around. Her mother's eyes lit up like a Christmas tree. Oh, you should stop by the town square. They've got the holiday market set up, crafts, music, all that festive stuff. And I heard the ice cream shop is doing peppermint shakes. Brooke chuckled. Peppermint shakes in December? That's ambitious. Tradition, her dad said, grinning. You know this town. We'd eat ice cream during a blizzard if it came with sprinkles. After breakfast, Brooke bundled up in a wool coat and scarf, her breath puffing white in the crisp air. The town looked like something out of a snow globe, brick storefronts lined with garlands, lampposts wrapped in red ribbons, and a towering Christmas tree in the square, its lights twinkling against the pale winter sky. She wandered past the bakery, inhaling the sweet scent of gingerbread, and paused at the bookstore window. A hand-lettered sign read, "Holiday Book Drive, donate and share the joy." The display was charming, stacks of novels tied with plaid ribbons, a tiny sleigh perched on top. Brooke smiled faintly. She'd always loved bookstores, though her life lately had been more about legal briefs than paperbacks. She made a mental note to stop in later. For now, she headed toward the coffee shop, where the line snaked out the door. Familiar faces dotted the crowd, people she'd known since childhood, now with spouses, kids, and holiday sweaters. Brooke felt a pang of something, nostalgia, maybe, or the sharp edge of comparison. She ordered a latte and found a seat by the window, watching snowflakes drift lazily past the glass. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend. Jenna, heard you're back in town. Drinks tonight?" Brooke smiled and typed back, "Absolutely. Need all the holiday cheer I can get." When she left the coffee shop, the cold bit at her cheeks, but the festive hum of the town softened the sting. She strolled toward the ice cream shop, drawn by the neon sign glowing like a beacon. Inside, the air was warm and sweet, filled with the scent of chocolate and peppermint. And that's when she saw him, Ethan Hayes. He was sitting at the counter, hunched over a paperback, a chocolate milkshake in front of him. His hair was darker now, his shoulders broader, but there was something unmistakable about the curve of his jaw, the way he held himself, quiet, self-contained. Brooke froze, her heart doing a ridiculous little flip. 15 years had passed since 8th grade, since that awkward, perfect first kiss behind the bleachers. She dropped him for the quarterback 2 weeks later, a decision that had haunted her in fleeting, guilty flashes over the years. She almost turned around. Almost. But then Ethan looked up and their eyes met. For a beat, there was no recognition, just polite curiosity. Then his gaze sharpened, and Brooke saw the moment it clicked. "Brooke Sullivan," he said, his voice deeper now, smooth as dark chocolate. Brooke swallowed. "Ethan Hayes." He closed his book, marking the page with a finger. "Wow, it's been what? 15 years. Something like that." Brooke managed to smile, though her pulse was doing cartwheels. "You're back in town?" "Moved back last year," Ethan said. "Running the bookstore now." He nodded toward the window, where the holiday display gleamed. Brooke blinked. "That's yours? It looks amazing." "Thanks." His smile was small but genuine. "What about you? Visiting for the holidays?" Brooke hesitated. "Yeah, sort of. Taking a break." She didn't elaborate and Ethan didn't press. "Well," he said after a pause, "it's good to see you." "You too," Brooke replied, her voice softer than she intended. Ethan glanced at his milkshake, then back at her. "I should get going." And just like that, he slid off the stool, tucked his book under his arm, and walked out into the cold. Brooke stood there, rooted to the spot, her breath caught somewhere between her chest and her throat. She told herself it didn't matter. It was just a chance encounter. Nothing more. But as she ordered a peppermint shake she didn't really want, one thought kept circling in her mind like snowflakes in the wind. "He didn't even ask for my number." Chapter 3, The Milkshake Moment. Brooke told herself she wasn't thinking about Ethan Hayes. She told herself this as she walked back to her parents' house, as she sat through her mother's enthusiastic rundown of the holiday festival schedule, and again as she curled up on the couch with a mug of cocoa that tasted faintly of guilt. But the truth was, she couldn't shake the image of him, dark hair falling across his forehead, the quiet confidence in the way he'd closed his book, the polite smile that felt like a door shutting softly in her face. She tried to rationalize it. They were kids when they dated. If you could call 3 months of awkward hand-holding and one clumsy kiss dating. People change. He'd probably forgotten all about her. Still, when Jenna texted later that evening, "Meet at Murphy's. 7 p.m. Bring your holiday spirit." Brooke jumped at the chance. Maybe a night out would clear her head. Murphy's was the same as ever. A cozy bar with twinkling lights strung across the ceiling and a jukebox that alternated between classic rock and Christmas hits. Brooke spotted Jenna immediately. Her blonde hair piled in a messy bun, a sequined sweater that screamed festive and fearless. "Look at you." Jenna enveloped Brooke in a hug that smelled like vanilla and peppermint schnapps. "City girl back in town. I heard rumors, but I needed confirmation." Brooke laughed, sliding onto the stool beside her. "Rumors? That you quit your fancy job and came home to find yourself?" Jenna grinned, waving at the bartender. "2 cranberry spritzers, please." "Not exactly quit," Brooke muttered. "More like, forcibly liberated." Jenna's brows shot up. "What happened?" Brooke hesitated, then sighed. "Big case. Big failure. Not my fault, but I was the easiest scapegoat. So, here I am." Jenna winced. "Ouch. Well, their loss. You're brilliant." Brooke smiled faintly. "Thanks." They clinked glasses, and for a while, Brooke let herself relax, laughing at Jenna's stories about PDA drama and the town's obsession with competitive Christmas lights. But then Jenna leaned in, eyes sparkling with mischief. "So," she said, drawing out the word like a cat playing with yarn, Have you seen him yet? Brooke blinked. Who? Ethan Hayes. Jenna grinned. Don't play dumb. He's back in town. Owns the bookstore now. And rumor has it, he's single. Brooke's stomach did a ridiculous flip. I ran into him today. At the ice cream shop. Jenna squealed. No way. How was it? Sparks? Fireworks? A dramatic mistletoe moment. More like polite conversation and a quick exit, Brooke said dryly. Jenna waved a hand. Classic Ethan. Quiet, reserved. But trust me, he's a catch. And you two have history. History that ended when I dumped him for the quarterback, Brooke reminded her, grimacing. Ancient history, Jenna said breezily. You were 13. He probably doesn't even care. Brooke wasn't so sure. Later, walking home under a sky dusted with stars, Brooke passed the bookstore again. The lights inside glowed warm against the cold night, and she imagined Ethan there. Stacking novels, sipping tea, maybe reading by the counter. She told herself to keep walking, and she did. But the thought lingered like the echo of a song she couldn't quite forget. The next afternoon, Brooke found herself back at the ice cream shop. She told herself it was for the peppermint shake. Research, nostalgia, whatever excuse sounded reasonable. But when she pushed open the door and saw Ethan at the same counter, book in hand, her pulse betrayed her. He looked up, and this time his smile was immediate. Brooke, Ethan. She slid onto the stool beside him, trying to appear casual. You're consistent, he chuckled softly. Creature of habit. Chocolate milkshake. Good book. Quiet corner. Hard to beat. Brooke glanced at the paperback in his hand. What are you reading? A Christmas Carol. He held it up, the worn cover creased from years of love. Tradition. Classic, Brooke said, smiling. Let me guess. You're a Scrooge sympathizer? Not exactly, Ethan said, his eyes warm with amusement. But I like the idea of second chances. The words landed like a pebble in a still pond, sending ripples through Brooke's chest. She cleared her throat. So, bookstore owner. That's a change. After college, I worked in publishing for a while, Ethan said. Big city, long hours. Eventually decided I wanted something quieter. Something that felt like home. Brooke nodded slowly. I get that. What about you? He asked. Still lawyering? Brooke hesitated. Not at the moment. Taking a break. Ethan didn't press, and she was grateful. Instead, he gestured toward her shake. Peppermint. Festive, Brooke said with a shrug. Though I'm starting to think chocolate might be the superior choice. Always, Ethan said, smiling. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, the hum of holiday music filling the space between them. Brooke felt something she hadn't felt in months, ease, warmth, the faint spark of possibility. When Ethan stood to leave, Brooke's heart dipped. Heading out. Bookstore's calling, he said, slipping his coat on. Then, after a pause, you should stop by sometime. We've got a whole display of legal thrillers. Brooke laughed. Tempting. He smiled, small, genuine. And then he was gone, the bell above the door jingling softly in his wake. Brooke stared at her half-empty shake, her pulse still humming. She told herself it was nothing, just a friendly invitation. But deep down, she knew better. Chapter for small-town sparks. Brooke woke the next morning to the sound of sleigh bells jingling faintly outside. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming, until she peeked through the curtains and saw a horse-drawn carriage rolling down Main Street, its wheels crunching over fresh snow. Small-town Christmas was in full swing. She dressed quickly, pulling on jeans, boots, and a chunky knit sweater that smelled faintly of cedar from the closet. Her mother was already in the kitchen, humming along to Bing Crosby while frosting sugar cookies shaped like reindeer. Morning, her mom chirped. Big day in town. The holiday festival starts at noon. You should go. Brooke poured coffee, trying to sound casual. Maybe. Not maybe, definitely, her mom said, wagging a spatula. You need fresh air. And fun. And who knows? Maybe you'll run into someone special. Brooke rolled her eyes, but her pulse betrayed her. She wasn't planning to run into anyone. Not really. But if Ethan happened to be there, well, that wasn't her fault, was it? The town square was a postcard come to life. Snow-dusted rooftops, garlands strung across lampposts, and the towering Christmas tree glittering like a jewel in the center. Booths lined the sidewalks, selling everything from handmade ornaments to steaming mugs of cider. Children darted past in puffy coats, their laughter ringing like bells. Brooke wandered through the crowd, sipping hot cocoa and trying not to feel like an outsider. Everyone seemed to know everyone. Couples strolled hand in hand, families posed for photos under the tree, and Brooke was solo. She was examining a display of knitted scarves when a familiar voice cut through the hum of chatter. Brooke Sullivan. She turned, heart doing that ridiculous flip again. Ethan stood a few feet away, hands tucked into the pockets of a navy coat, snowflakes clinging to his dark hair. Ethan, she said, smiling despite herself. You're everywhere. Small town, he said with a shrug, his lips curving into a faint smile. Hard to hide. Brooke laughed softly. What brings you to the festival? Bookstore outreach. Something like that. He gestured toward a booth near the tree, stacked with novels tied in plaid ribbons. A sign read, Holiday Book Drive. Give the gift of reading. Brooke's brows lifted. That's yours. Guilty, Ethan said, trying to spread a little cheer. Brooke glanced at the display, then back at him. That's really nice. Thanks. His gaze held hers for a beat, warm and steady. Then he nodded toward the booth. Want to help? We're short on volunteers. Brooke hesitated. She'd come here to blend in, not to stand out. But something in Ethan's tone, gentle, inviting, made it hard to say no. Sure, she said, surprising herself. Why not? An hour later, Brooke was tying ribbons around donated books, laughing as a gust of wind sent a stack tumbling like dominoes. Ethan caught the last one before it hit the ground, his hand brushing hers in the process. Nice reflexes, Brooke said, her voice lighter than she felt. Years of practice, Ethan replied, his smile quick and easy. They worked side by side, chatting about everything and nothing. Favorite holiday movies, the best pie in town, the absurdity of inflatable lawn decorations. Brooke found herself laughing more than she had in months, the sound unfamiliar but welcome. At one point, Jenna appeared, her eyes widening like a kid spotting Santa. Well, she drawled, eyeing Brooke and Ethan with shameless glee. Look at you two, spreading holiday cheer and sparks. Brooke shot her a look that could melt snow. Jenna. What? Jenna grinned. I'm just saying this is cute, like Hallmark level cute. Ethan chuckled, adjusting the stack of books. Nice to see you, Jenna. You too, Jenna said, winking at Brooke before sauntering off. Brooke groaned softly. Ignore her. Noted, Ethan said, his eyes glinting with amusement. As the afternoon waned, the square glowed under strings of lights, and carolers gathered near the tree, their voices weaving through the crisp air. Brooke felt a strange tug in her chest, a mix of nostalgia and something new, something warm. When the last book was tied and the booth packed up, Ethan turned to her. Thanks for helping. I owe you one. Brooke smiled, happy to contribute to the cause. Maybe I can return the favor, Ethan said, his tone casual but his gaze steady. Coffee sometime? Brooke's breath caught. Coffee. Simple. Innocent. And yet her heart was thudding like she'd just been asked to climb Everest. Sure, she said, hoping her voice sounded normal. I'd like that. Ethan's smile deepened, slow and genuine. Great. Tomorrow, around 10. Tomorrow works, Brooke said, her pulse humming like Christmas lights. As she walked home under the glow of the holiday tree, snow crunching beneath her boots, Brooke felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Anticipation. And maybe, just maybe, a spark. Chapter 5, The Christmas Festival. The next morning, Brooke woke to sunlight glinting off fresh snow, turning the world outside her window into a glittering wonderland. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. Jenna, festival tonight. Don't bail. I'll drag you out myself. Brooke smiled faintly. She wasn't planning to bail. Not after yesterday's conversation with Ethan. Coffee at 10. Simple. Casual. And yet her stomach fluttered like a snow globe shaken too hard. She dressed carefully, telling herself it was for warmth, not aesthetics. Dark jeans, a cream sweater, and the burgundy scarf her mother had knitted years ago. When she walked into the kitchen, her mom gave her a look that could only be described as knowing. Big plans? Her mom asked, sliding a plate of toast across the counter. Coffee, Brooke said, trying for nonchalance. With anyone special? Brooke ignored the question and focused on her toast. The bookstore smelled like cinnamon and old paper, the kind of scent that wrapped around you like a blanket. Brooke pushed open the door and was greeted by the soft chime of bells and the sight of Ethan behind the counter, stacking a pile of hardcovers. He looked up, and that smile, slow, warm, unhurried, spread across his face. Right on time. Lawyers are punctual, Brooke said, stepping inside. Even on vacation. Especially on vacation, she said, grinning. Ethan gestured toward a small table near the window, where 2 steaming cups waited. I took the liberty. Brooke blinked. You ordered for me? Hazelnut latte, he said. Unless you've changed. Brooke stared at him, surprised. You remember that? Some things stick, Ethan said simply. Her pulse did a ridiculous somersault. She sat, wrapping her hands around the warm cup, and for a moment they just talked. About books, about the festival, about the absurdity of inflatable snowmen that deflate at midnight like sad balloons. It was easy. Too easy. And Brooke found herself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in weeks. By evening, the town square was alive with music and light. Brooke arrived with Jenna, who was practically vibrating with excitement. This is it, Jenna declared, tugging Brooke toward the tree. The pinnacle of holiday cheer. And maybe romance. Jenna, Brooke warned, but her friend was already scanning the crowd like a hawk. Relax, Jenna said, grinning. Just enjoy yourself. Brooke tried. She wandered past booths selling caramel apples and handmade ornaments, watched kids skate on the temporary rink, and listened to carolers harmonize under the glow of lanterns. And then she saw him. Ethan stood near the book drive booth, talking to an elderly woman with a stack of novels in her arms. He looked comfortable, at ease, like he belonged here in a way Brooke suddenly envied. When he spotted her, his smile was immediate. "Brooke." "Ethan," she said, her voice warmer than the cocoa in her hands. "Glad you made it," he said. "Want to help again? We've got a rush." Brooke hesitated, then nodded. "Sure." They worked side by side, tying ribbons and chatting between donations. At one point, a little girl in a red coat toddled up, clutching a picture book. "For the kids who don't have any," she said solemnly, placing it on the pile. Brooke's heart melted. "That's very kind of you." Ethan smiled at the girl, his voice gentle. "You're making someone very happy." Brooke watched him, something soft unfurling in her chest. He wasn't just polite, he was kind. The kind of kind that didn't need an audience. When the rush slowed, Ethan turned to her. "You hungry? There's a food truck with the best gingerbread funnel cakes." Brooke laughed. "That sounds dangerously good." "Come on," he said, his eyes glinting. "Live a little." The funnel cake was warm and sweet, dusted with powdered sugar that clung to Brooke's gloves. She took a bite and groaned softly. "Okay, you were right." "Told you," Ethan said, grinning. They stood near the tree, lights twinkling above them, music drifting through the crisp air. Brooke felt the moment stretch, soft, golden, threaded with something unspoken. And then Jenna appeared, like a glittery hurricane. "There you are," she exclaimed, eyes darting between them. "Oh my gosh, this is adorable. Funnel cake, Christmas lights. Brooke, if you don't kiss him under that tree, I swear." "Jenna?" Brooke hissed, mortified. Ethan chuckled, his gaze warm. "I think that's my cue to escape before I become part of a rom-com plot." Brooke laughed, cheeks burning. "Sorry. She's enthusiastic." "I like enthusiastic," Ethan said, his tone easy. "Keeps life interesting." Before he left, he glanced at her, his voice low. "Tomorrow. Bookstore. Noon." Brooke nodded, her heart thudding like sleigh bells. "Tomorrow." As he walked away, Jenna fanned herself dramatically. "Girl, that man is Hallmark-level handsome. And he likes books. Marry him immediately." Brooke rolled her eyes, but her smile lingered all the way home. Chapter 6, Snowball Conversations. The next day dawned gray and heavy, the kind of sky that whispered promises of snow. Brooke pulled on her boots and headed to the bookstore, her breath puffing in the frosty air. Inside, the warmth hit her like a hug. The scent of cinnamon lingered, mingling with the faint musk of old paper. Ethan was behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, stacking a tower of hardcovers that looked one sneeze away from collapse. "You're punctual," he said, flashing that slow smile that made Brooke's pulse skip. "Lawyer habits die hard," she replied, brushing snow from her coat. "Coffee?" he asked, gesturing toward the small table by the window. Brooke nodded, and soon they were seated with steaming mugs, the glass fogging slightly from the heat. Outside, snowflakes began to drift lazily, like someone had shaken a glitter jar over the town. They talked easily, about books, about the festival, about the absurdity of inflatable Santas that deflate at midnight like sad balloons. Brooke found herself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in weeks. And then the wind picked up. By noon, the snow had turned serious, swirling in thick white sheets that blurred the world beyond the window. Brooke frowned. "That looks intense." Ethan checked his phone. "Forecast says it's a full-on snowstorm. Roads are closing." Brooke blinked. "You're kidding." "Afraid not." He glanced at her, his tone calm. "Looks like you're stuck here for a while." Brooke's stomach flipped. Stuck in a bookstore with Ethan Hayes. This was either a rom-com dream or a logistical nightmare. Ethan moved around the shop with easy efficiency, flipping the sign to closed and stoking the small fireplace in the corner. Brooke watched him, oddly fascinated by the quiet competence in his movements. "Sorry about this," he said, tossing a log onto the fire. "Storms roll in fast here." "It's fine," Brooke said, settling into an armchair near the hearth. "Better than being stuck in traffic." "True," Ethan said, handing her a blanket from a nearby shelf. "Perks of a bookstore. Warmth, books, and emergency cocoa." Brooke laughed softly. "You have cocoa?" "Of course," Ethan said, disappearing into the back and returning with 2 steaming mugs. "What kind of monster runs a bookstore without cocoa?" She accepted the mug, fingers curling around the heat. "You're full of surprises." "Am I?" His eyes glinted, and for a moment, the air between them felt charged, warm despite the storm raging outside. Hours passed in a rhythm that felt strangely timeless. They sat by the fire, sipping cocoa, trading stories. Brooke told him about law school, about the case that had derailed her career. Ethan listened without judgment, his gaze steady, his questions thoughtful. "It wasn't your fault," he said quietly when she finished. Brooke blinked. "You don't even know the details." "I know you," Ethan said simply. "You've always been thorough, honest." The words landed like a bomb, easing a sting Brooke hadn't realized she was still carrying. She swallowed hard, her voice softer. "Thank you." Ethan smiled, slow and genuine. "Anytime." Later, when the fire crackled low and the storm howled against the windows, Brooke wandered through the aisles, trailing her fingers along spines. She paused at a shelf of classics, pulling down a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. Still a favorite? Ethan's voice came from behind her, warm and amused. Brooke turned, smiling. Always. Elizabeth Bennet, he said, leaning against the shelf. Sharp, independent, a little stubborn. Sounds familiar, Brooke teased. His smile deepened. Maybe. For a moment they just stood there, the silence threaded with something electric. Brooke felt her breath hitch, her pulse thudding like sleigh bells. And then Ethan stepped back, his voice easy. Storm's letting up. You'll be able to head home soon. Brooke nodded, forcing a smile. But inside, something tugged, a quiet disappointment she didn't want to name. When she finally stepped outside, the world was hushed and white, the snow glittering under streetlights like spilled diamonds. Ethan walked her to her car, his coat dusted with frost, his breath curling in the cold. Drive safe, he said, his voice low. Thanks, Brooke replied, her fingers tightening on the door handle. For a heartbeat, she thought he might say more. But then he just smiled, small, steady, and turned back toward the bookstore. Brooke slid into her car, her chest tight with something she couldn't quite define. As she drove home through the snow, one thought kept circling like a refrain. She didn't want the storm to end. Chapter 7: Family Pressure and Festive Chaos. Christmas Eve morning arrived with the scent of cinnamon rolls and the sound of carols drifting through the Sullivan house. Brooke padded into the kitchen, hair tousled, wearing her favorite flannel pajamas. Her mother was in full holiday mode, apron dusted with flour, humming along to Jingle Bell Rock as she basted a turkey like it was a sacred ritual. Morning, sweetheart, her mom chirped, barely glancing up. Big night ahead. Dinner at 6. And guess what? Brooke poured coffee, bracing herself. What? I invited Ethan. The mug nearly slipped from Brooke's hand. You what? Her mother beamed, oblivious to Brooke's internal meltdown. Ran into him at the market yesterday. Such a nice young man. Said he'd love to come. Brooke stared, words tangling in her throat. Mom. Oh, don't mom me, her mother said, waving a spoon like a wand. You've been moping for weeks. It's Christmas. You need company. And he's single. Brooke groaned, pressing her forehead to the cabinet. This is mortifying. Mortifyingly festive, her mom corrected, grinning. Now go get dressed, and maybe do something with your hair. By 6, the house was glowing with twinkle lights, the table set with red and gold linens, and Brooke was silently rehearsing ways to survive the evening without combusting. She'd chosen a simple green sweater dress, festive but not trying too hard, or so she hoped. The doorbell rang, and her pulse spiked. Her dad answered, booming a cheerful, Ethan, come in, son. Brooke turned, and there he was, framed in the doorway like a Hallmark movie come to life. Navy coat, dark hair dusted with snow, a bottle of wine in one hand and a smile that made Brooke's knees consider mutiny. Hi, she managed, her voice thinner than she intended. Hi, Ethan said, his gaze warm. Thanks for having me. Thank my mom, Brooke muttered, shooting a look at the woman who was now bustling around like Cupid in an apron. Dinner was chaos, festive, noisy chaos. Her dad told stories that grew increasingly exaggerated with each glass of wine. Her mom kept dropping unsubtle hints about young love and holiday magic. Brooke wanted to crawl under the table. But Ethan handled it like a pro, laughing at her dad's jokes, complimenting her mom's cooking, even helping clear plates without being asked. Brooke watched him, something soft unfurling in her chest. He wasn't just polite, he was gracious, the kind of gracious that made you feel seen. After dessert, her mom suggested a game of holiday trivia. Brooke groaned, but Ethan smiled, settling beside her on the couch. Team up, he asked, his voice low enough to make her pulse skip. Sure, Brooke said, trying to sound casual. They crushed the competition, Brooke's sharp memory paired with Ethan's encyclopedic knowledge of Christmas carols. When they high-fived after a perfect answer, Brooke felt the brush of his hand linger just a fraction too long. And then came the mistletoe. Her mom had hung it in the doorway like a trap, and Brooke walked straight into it. Ethan stopped beside her, his gaze flicking upward, then back to hers. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the space between them. The glow of the tree, the hum of carols, the warmth in his eyes. Brooke's breath caught. Ethan smiled, slow, teasing, and stepped back. Guess we'll save that for later. Brooke exhaled, her cheeks burning, her heart thudding like sleigh bells. When he left, the night air crisp and glittering with frost, Brooke walked him to the door. Thanks for coming, she said, her voice softer than she intended. Thanks for having me, Ethan replied. Then, after a pause, tomorrow. Walk through the lights. Brooke nodded, her pulse humming. Tomorrow. As the door closed behind him, her mom appeared like a stealthy elf, eyes sparkling. He's lovely, Brooke groaned. Mom. Her mom grinned. Just saying. Christmas miracles happen. Brooke rolled her eyes, but her smile lingered all the way to bed. Chapter 8. The X Factor. The day after Christmas dawned crisp and clear. the snow glittering like powdered sugar under a pale winter sun. Brooke bundled up in her favorite coat and scarf, her heart humming with anticipation. Ethan had texted that morning. Meet at the square? Noon. Lights walk. Simple words, but they sent a thrill through her that felt almost reckless. She arrived early, the square still buzzing from last night's festivities. Vendors were packing up, carolers had gone home, but the towering tree still glowed, its ornaments catching the light like tiny jewels. Brooke tucked her hands into her pockets, scanning the street for Ethan, and that's when she heard it. Brooke Sullivan? No way. The voice was deep, familiar in a way that made her stomach tighten. Not with excitement, but with dread. She turned slowly, and there he was, Ryan Matthews, the quarterback. The boy who dumped her 2 weeks after she dumped Ethan all those years ago. Ryan looked older but not necessarily wiser. His Letterman jacket had been replaced by a leather one, his grin still carrying that same cocky tilt. Ryan, Brooke said, forcing a polite smile. Wow, it's been a long time. Sure has, Ryan said, giving her a slow once-over that made her want to crawl into the nearest snowbank. You look great. City life treating you well. Brooke opened her mouth to respond, but Ryan barreled on. Heard you're back in town. Visiting family? Or looking for old flames? His grin widened, and Brooke's cheeks burned. Not from the cold. I'm just, she began, but Ryan cut her off with a laugh. Man, 8th grade. Remember that? You were something else. Bet you still are. Brooke's jaw tightened. She was seconds away from inventing an emergency phone call when a voice slid into the space between them. Calm, steady, and warm enough to melt frost. Brooke. She turned, relief flooding her chest. Ethan stood a few feet away, hands in his coat pockets, his expression unreadable but his presence grounding her like nothing else. Hey, Brooke said, her voice softer than she intended. Ethan's gaze flicked to Ryan, polite but cool. Everything okay? Ryan smirked, clearly sizing him up. Just catching up with an old friend. Good to know, Ethan said evenly. Then he looked at Brooke, his tone gentle. Ready for that walk? Brooke nodded, grateful for the lifeline. Absolutely. Ryan's grin faltered as Ethan stepped closer, his hand brushing Brooke's arm. Not possessive, just steady. Brooke felt the warmth of that touch all the way to her bones. See you around, Brooke, Ryan said, his voice edged with something sharp. Sure, Brooke replied, already turning away. They walked in silence for a few minutes, the crunch of snow underfoot filling the space where words might have been. Brooke's pulse was still racing, but not from Ryan. Sorry about that, she said finally, her breath curling in the cold. Ryan's? Persistent. Ethan's lips curved faintly. I gathered. Brooke glanced at him, her voice tentative. You didn't have to step in. I wanted to, Ethan said simply. His tone wasn't dramatic, wasn't heavy. It was just truth, laid bare in the winter air. Brooke swallowed hard, her chest tightening with something she didn't want to name yet. The lights were breathtaking. Arches of twinkling bulbs strung across the park, glowing reindeer nestled in drifts of snow, lanterns casting golden halos on the path. Brooke and Ethan wandered slowly, their conversation easing back into warmth like a fire rekindled. They talked about childhood Christmases, about favorite traditions, about the ridiculousness of fruitcake. Brooke found herself laughing again, the sound mingling with the soft strains of carols drifting from hidden speakers. At one point, they stopped under an arch of lights, the world around them hushed and glowing. Brooke felt the moment stretch, soft, shimmering, threaded with possibility. Ethan looked at her, his gaze steady, his voice low. You okay? Brooke nodded, her breath catching. Better now. His smile was slow, warm, and for a heartbeat, she thought he might close the distance between them. Her pulse thudded like sleigh bells, her breath hitching, and then a group of kids barreled past, laughing, breaking the spell like a snowball to the face. Ethan chuckled softly, stepping back. Timing, he murmured. Brooke laughed too, though her cheeks burned. Yeah. They walked on, the air between them charged, the promise of something lingering like the glow of the lights. When they reached the end of the path, Ethan turned to her, his voice gentle. Tomorrow. Coffee again. Brooke smiled, her heart humming like a carol. Tomorrow. As she watched him walk away, his figure framed by the glittering lights, one thought settled in her chest like a secret gift. She didn't want this to end. Chapter 9. Almost kiss. The next evening, Brooke stood in front of her mirror, staring at her reflection like it held answers. She'd chosen a soft cream sweater, dark jeans, and boots that were practical but still flattering. Her hair fell in loose waves, and she dabbed on a hint of lip color, just enough to look like she hadn't tried too hard, even though she absolutely had. Her mother peeked in, eyes twinkling. Going out. Brooke grabbed her coat. Just a walk. With Ethan. Brooke groaned. Mom. Her mother grinned, unrepentant. Don't forget the mistletoe magic. Brooke escaped before the commentary could escalate, her pulse already racing. The town was a winter wonderland. Strings of lights draped across rooftops, glowing reindeer nestled in snowbanks, and lanterns casting golden halos along the path. Brooke spotted Ethan near the fountain, his breath curling in the frosty air, his navy coat dusted with snowflakes like stars. "Hey," he said, his smile slow and warm. "Hey," Brooke replied, her voice softer than she intended. They fell into step easily, wandering through the park where the lights shimmered like captured starlight. The air was crisp, the world hushed except for the distant strains of carols and the crunch of snow beneath their boots. For a while, they talked, about favorite holiday traditions, about the absurdity of fruitcake, about how Brooke once tried to knit a scarf and ended up with something that looked like a potholder. Ethan laughed, the sound rich and easy, and Brooke felt it settle in her chest like warmth from a fire. When they reached the gazebo at the center of the park, Brooke stopped, breath catching. It was draped in white lights, glowing like something out of a dream. Snowflakes drifted lazily around them, and for a moment, the world felt impossibly still. "This is beautiful," Brooke murmured. "Yeah," Ethan said, his gaze steady. Not on the lights, but on her. Brooke felt her pulse thrum, her breath hitching as the space between them seemed to shrink. His eyes were warm, intent, and for a heartbeat, she hoped he might close the distance. Her heart pounded like sleigh bells. She could feel the heat of him, the quiet strength in his presence, the way the air seemed charged with something electric. And then, a burst of laughter shattered the moment. A group of teenagers barreled past, tossing snowballs, their voices echoing through the park. Brooke stepped back instinctively, the spell breaking like thin ice. Ethan chuckled softly, his breath curling in the cold. "Timing," he murmured, his voice low and amused. Brooke laughed too, though her cheeks burned. "Yeah." They walked on, the silence between them threaded with something unspoken. Brooke's thoughts tangled like Christmas lights. Hope, fear, longing, all knotted together. She wanted to say something, to bridge the gap, but the words stayed lodged in her throat. When they reached the edge of the park, Ethan turned to her, his voice gentle. "Coffee tomorrow?" Brooke smiled, her heart humming like a carol. "Tomorrow." As she watched him walk away, his figure framed by the glow of lanterns and falling snow, one thought settled in her chest like a secret gift. She almost kissed him, and she wanted to, more than anything. Chapter 10: The Big Gesture. Brooke woke to a sky the color of pewter, snowflakes drifting lazily past her window like feathers. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Ethan, stop by the bookstore today. Noon. Trust me." Her pulse kicked up like sleigh bells. "Trust me." Two words that felt heavier than they should. She stared at them for a long moment, then threw on her warmest coat and boots, her breath fogging as she stepped into the crisp winter air. The bookstore was quiet when she arrived, the bell above the door chiming softly. Warm light spilled across rows of shelves, and the scent of cinnamon mingled with old paper. "Ethan?" she called, brushing snow from her coat. "Back here." His voice floated from the rear of the shop. Brooke followed the sound, weaving through aisles until she reached the small reading nook and stopped dead. Her breath caught. The space had been transformed. A makeshift courtroom filled the cozy corner. Two chairs facing each other like opposing counsel. A stack of law books serving as a judge's bench, and a handwritten sign that read, "Brooke Sullivan versus Self-Doubt." Brooke blinked, stunned. "What is this?" Ethan stood beside the display, his smile slow and warm. "Your case. The one you've been fighting in your head since you got home." Brooke stared at him, words tangling in her throat. "You did this." "Guilty?" Ethan said, his eyes glinting with quiet humor. "Thought maybe it was time you won something." Brooke laughed, soft, shaky, the sound catching on a lump in her throat. "This is ridiculous. Ridiculously brilliant," Ethan corrected, pulling out a chair. "Come on, let's settle this." She sat, still dazed, as Ethan took the opposite seat, adopting a mock-serious expression. "Opening statement," he said, his tone playful but his gaze steady. "Brooke Sullivan is not a failure. She's smart, capable, and resilient. Exhibit A, surviving law school without losing her soul. Exhibit B, winning every argument with Jenna since 8th grade. Brooke laughed, cheeks warming. Objection. Jenna would disagree. Overruled, Ethan said, grinning. Exhibit C, showing up here today, even when life knocked her sideways. Brooke swallowed hard, her smile faltering under the weight of his words. Ethan. He leaned forward, his voice softening. You've been carrying this like it's a verdict, but it's not. It's one case, one loss. It doesn't define you. Brooke felt something crack open inside her, a fissure where light spilled through. She blinked fast, her throat tight. You don't know how much I needed to hear that. I had a hunch, Ethan said gently. For a moment, silence stretched between them, warm and charged. Brooke's heart thudded like sleigh bells, her breath catching as Ethan's gaze held hers. Steady, intent, threaded with something that made her pulse race. He stood slowly, moving around the table, and Brooke felt her breath hitch as he stopped in front of her. Verdict, he murmured, his voice low. You win. Brooke laughed softly, her cheeks burning. What's the sentence? Ethan's smile deepened, slow and deliberate. Coffee, dinner, maybe more. Her heart somersaulted. That sounds fair. And then, finally, he bent, closing the distance, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that was soft, sure, and everything she hadn't realized she'd been waiting for. The world outside could have vanished. The snow, the cold, the hum of carols. All Brooke felt was warmth, and the quiet certainty that this was no accident. This was something real. When they broke apart, breath mingling in the hush, Ethan's smile was tender. "Christmas miracles," he said. Brooke laughed, her pulse still racing. "Guess I believe in them now." Chapter 11, Christmas Eve Confession. Christmas Eve wrapped the town in a hush of snow and light. Brooke stood at her bedroom window, watching flakes drift like whispers against the glass. Downstairs, laughter and carols spilled from the living room, her parents hosting their annual holiday gathering, the house glowing with warmth and cheer. But Brooke's thoughts were elsewhere, on a kiss in a quiet bookstore, on the way Ethan's voice had softened when he said, "You win," on the way her heart had leapt like it was finally free. Her phone buzzed. "Ethan, outside." Brooke's breath caught. She grabbed her coat and scarf, her pulse thrumming like sleigh bells, and slipped out the front door into the crisp night. He was waiting by the gate, snow dusting his hair, his smile slow and steady. "Hey, hey," Brooke said, her voice softer than the hush around them. "Walk?" he asked, offering his arm like it was the most natural thing in the world. She slipped her hand through, and together they strolled down the quiet street, past houses glowing with Christmas lights, past wreaths and ribbons and the faint strains of carols drifting from open windows. For a while, they didn't speak. The silence wasn't awkward. It was warm, threaded with something that felt like promise. Brooke's heart beat in time with the crunch of snow beneath their boots. Finally, Ethan stopped near the park, where the towering tree shimmered like a jewel against the night sky. He turned to her, his breath curling in the cold, his gaze steady. "I've been trying to find the right words," he said quietly, "but I think simple is best." Brooke swallowed hard, her pulse racing. "Okay. I never forgot you," Ethan said, his voice low, deliberate. "Not the 8th grade version, the real you. The girl who laughed too loud at bad jokes, who argued about everything just to see if she could win. The girl who kissed me behind the bleachers and made me think, maybe life could be magic." Brooke blinked fast, her throat tight. "Ethan, I know we were kids," he continued, his tone gentle, "but you were my first everything. And when I saw you at that ice cream shop, it was like the world tilted back into place." Brooke felt tears prick her eyes, hot against the winter chill. "I thought you hated me," she whispered. After you chose someone else?" Ethan's smile was faint. I was hurt, sure, but I was 13. And honestly, I think I always knew you'd come back into my life somehow." Brooke laughed softly, shaky. "You sound awfully confident." "Not confident," Ethan said, stepping closer, his voice low. "Hopeful." Brooke's breath hitched as the space between them vanished, as his hands slid gently to her arms, warm even through the wool. "I don't want this to be just nostalgia," he murmured. "I want us. Now, if you do." Brooke's heart thudded like sleigh bells, her thoughts tumbling like snowflakes. She thought of the case, the loss, the hollow ache she'd carried for weeks. And then she thought of this, of laughter in a bookstore, of cocoa by the fire, of a kiss that felt like a beginning instead of an ending. "I do," she whispered. And then his lips were on hers, soft, sure, lingering like a promise. The world around them blurred into light and snow and music, and Brooke felt something settle deep in her chest, certainty. When they broke apart, breath mingling in the hush, Ethan smiled, his voice tender. "Merry Christmas, Brooke." Brooke laughed, her cheeks flushed, her heart soaring. "Merry Christmas." Chapter 12, New Year, New Beginnings. New Year's Eve arrived draped in silver and anticipation. The town square glittered under strings of lights, the fountain frozen into a sculpture of ice, and Brooke felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. She stood in her childhood bedroom, slipping on a deep emerald dress that hugged her just enough to feel confident without screaming, "Look at me." Her hair fell in soft waves, and she added a touch of shimmer to her eyes, catching her reflection with a smile that felt new. Downstairs, her parents were bustling with plans for their own quiet celebration, but Brooke had other plans. Ethan had texted that morning. "Ethan, midnight at the square? Fireworks and coffee." Brooke grinned at the memory, her pulse quickening as she grabbed her coat and stepped into the crisp night. The square was alive with laughter and music, couples huddled under blankets, kids twirling sparklers like tiny stars. Brooke scanned the crowd, her breath curling in the frosty air, and then she saw him. Ethan stood near the tree, his navy coat dusted with snow, his smile slow and steady when his eyes found hers. "Hey," he said, his voice warm against the winter chill. "Hey," Brooke replied, her heart thudding like the countdown clock. They wandered through the square, sipping cocoa from paper cups, talking about everything and nothing, favorite fireworks, resolutions they'd never keep, the absurdity of gym memberships in January. Brooke laughed until her cheeks ached, the sound mingling with the hum of carols and the crackle of distant fireworks. When the countdown began, 10, 9, 8, the crowd pressed closer to the tree, voices rising in a chorus of excitement. Brooke felt Ethan's hand brush hers, then curl gently around her fingers, warm and sure. 7, 6, 5. Her pulse raced, her breath catching as she turned to him. His gaze held hers, steady, intent, threaded with something that made the world blur. For 3, 2, 1. Fireworks exploded overhead, painting the sky in bursts of gold and crimson, and Ethan bent, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was soft and certain and everything Brooke had been waiting for. The world roared with color and sound, but Brooke felt only this, the warmth of his hands, the taste of cocoa and hope, the quiet certainty that this wasn't a fleeting spark. This was something real. When they broke apart, breath mingling in the hush between bursts of light, Ethan smiled, his voice low. "Happy New Year, Brooke." Brooke laughed, her cheeks flushed, her heart soaring. "Happy New Year." Later, as they strolled through the quiet streets, Brooke felt the weight of the past weeks lift like snow melting under sunlight. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice tentative, "about what's next." Ethan glanced at her, his expression open. "And I don't want to go back to the city," Brooke admitted. "Not yet. Maybe ever." Ethan's smile was slow, warm. "What do you want?" Brooke exhaled, the words settling like truth. "To start fresh. Here. My own legal consultancy. Small cases, local clients. Something that feels balanced." Ethan's eyes glinted with quiet pride. "Sounds perfect." Brooke laughed softly. "You'd be my first client, you know? That book drive paperwork? A nightmare." "Consider it done," Ethan said, his tone teasing but his gaze tender. Brooke felt her chest tighten, not with fear, but with something bright and steady. A beginning. As they reached her gate, snow crunching underfoot, Brooke turned to him, her breath curling in the cold. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For reminding me who I am," Brooke murmured. "And for this." Ethan's smile deepened, slow and certain. "This is just the start." Brooke believed him. For the first time in a long time, she believed in beginnings. Chapter 13 Epilogue. Milkshakes and Mistletoe. 3 months later, winter had loosened its grip, but the town still wore a faint shimmer of frost like a memory. Brooke sat at a corner table in the ice cream shop, sunlight spilling across the checkered floor, her laptop open and a stack of papers beside her. Her consultancy was real now, registered, branded, and buzzing with local clients. She'd handled everything from small business contracts to estate planning, and for the first time in years, work felt like something she could breathe inside instead of drown in. The bell above the door jingled, and Brooke looked up, her smile blooming before she even saw him. Ethan walked in, carrying a worn paperback and that slow, steady smile that still made her pulse skip like a stone across water. "Busy?" he asked, sliding into the seat across from her. "Productively busy," Brooke said, closing her laptop. "Which is new for me." "Proud of you," Ethan said simply, and Brooke felt the words settle deep, warm and certain. He set the book down, then gestured toward the counter. "Chocolate milkshake?" Brooke laughed softly. "You never change." "Tradition," Ethan said, his eyes glinting. "And maybe a peppermint one for nostalgia?" Brooke grinned. "Deal." Minutes later, they sat with 2 frosty glasses between them. One chocolate, one peppermint, straws angled like a pair of crossed swords. Brooke took a sip, the cool sweetness mingling with the warmth in her chest. "Remember the first time we saw each other here?" she asked, her voice teasing. Ethan chuckled. "You mean when I almost bolted?" "You did bolt," Brooke said, laughing. "Polite but definite." "Regret of the century," Ethan murmured, his gaze steady. Brooke felt her cheeks warm, her heart thudding like sleigh bells even now. "Glad you fixed it." "Me too," Ethan said softly. Outside, the world was shifting toward spring, but inside, the shop still hummed with traces of Christmas. Twinkle lights lingering in the corners, a wreath stubbornly clinging to the door. Brooke glanced at it, smiling. "Mistletoe's gone," she said. Ethan leaned in, his voice low, warm. "Don't need it." And then his lips brushed hers, soft, certain, lingering like a promise. The milkshake sat forgotten, the world narrowing to this. Warmth, laughter, and the quiet certainty that beginnings could happen anywhere, even in a small-town ice cream shop, under the ghost of holiday lights. When they broke apart, Brooke laughed, breathless. "You know," she said, her voice teasing, "this might be the best case I've ever won." Ethan's smile deepened, slow and sure. "Verdict stands."